Once upon a time, in a faraway village, there lived an old man named Samson. Samson was not rich, but he had a very beautiful and happy home. He was a hardworking bus driver, but he didn't have a bus of his own. Instead, he drives other people's bus to earn a living and made sure his wife and children were always satisfied, even though they didn't have much. Samson's wife was beautiful and worked as a trader in the market, selling vegetables and fruits. Every morning, she prepared her goods with a smile and went to the market to support the family. Samson and his wife had three lovely children, two sons and a pretty daughter. They were all happy and loved each other deeply. Though they didn't have much money, their home was filled with love and joy. In the evening, after a long day's work, Samson would come home tired but with content. His wife welcomed him with a warm smile and a meal, and the children ran to hug him. They would sit together, laugh, and share stories. Samson's life was simple, filled with love and joy, showing that true wealth is measured by the happiness shared with those you care about. Samson had few friends in the village, but they were all wealthier than him. As time went on, these friends began to drift away because Samson was not as rich as they were. They didn't want to be seen with someone who was so poor and not up to their class and standard. Samson felt sad, but he always told himself, "My family is what matters most." One day, there was a big gathering in the village. Samson decided to go, hoping to enjoy some time with his old friends. When he arrived, he saw his friends laughing, eating and drinking together. They seemed really happy to see him at first and invited him to join them. Samson sat down and shared a meal with his friends, but after they finished eating, something happened that made Samson feel very sad and unhappy. One of his friends stood up and said, "Samson, since you are not as rich as us, you should pack the plates. At least, we bought you food." Samson was shocked to the bone marrow. He said, "We are all friends and I'm older than you all. Just because I don't have as much money as you doesn't mean you can treat me this way. Everyone should pack their own plates." But his friends laughed and said, "If you don't pack the plates, we will tell the seller that you haven't paid. That will be even more embarrassing for you." Samson had no choice. He had thought the food was for free, and that was why he came in the first place. He packed the plates and left the gathering feeling very sad and humiliated. He walked home slowly, thinking about how unfairly he had been treated by the people he called friends. When he got home, his wife noticed he was unhappy and asked him what happened. Samson sighed and replied, "My friends treated me badly today because I am not as rich as they are, but it doesn't really matter. I will always do my best for you and our children." That humiliation drove Samson to work harder every day. Despite the way his friends treated him, he knew that his family needed him, and he was determined to make sure that they were always happy and taken care of. Even though he was sad, his love for his family kept him strong. Samson was known in the village for his hard work. He drove passengers from the village to the market, sometimes on an empty stomach. Samson's friends, who were wealthier, often took advantage of him. They would ask him to do menial and degrading jobs, like washing their clothes or cleaning their houses to earn extra cash. One day, Samson asked one of his friends for some money to pay one of his children's school fees, as he had paid for the other two of his children, remaining just one. His friend laughed and said, "If you want money, you must work for it, Samson. Money is hard to come by, you know. Clean my house and wash my clothes." Samson felt humiliated but agreed because he needed the money, so he spent the whole day cleaning and washing. By the time he was done, he was exhausted. His friend gave him a small amount of money, much less than what he had earned. But Samson took it without complaining. Another time, Samson worked on a friend's farm from sunrise to sunset. He worked tirelessly, But when it was time to get paid, his friends said, "I don't have the money right now. Please come back next week." Samson felt frustrated, but he had no choice. He needed the extra work and cash to support his family. But despite all the unfair treatment and hard work, Samson never gave up. He would wake up very early in the morning and go to work. No matter how tired he was, he knew his family depended on him, and he wanted to make sure they had enough to eat and a roof over their heads. Samson's boss was giving him a hard time, and he needed to find a new bus owner to drive his bus. Mr. Osondo was a wealthy man in the village. He owned many buses, both big and small. Samson went to Mr. Osondo's house and requested for him to give him one of his buses so he would be accounting for him every Saturday of the week. Mr. Osondo looked at Samson and said, "Very well, Samson. My buses are many and I need all the good drivers I can get. You can come and take the bus tomorrow morning." The next day, Samson and one of his sons woke up very early before the sun rose. They made their way to Mr. Osondo's house for the bus. They worked tirelessly. His son was the conductor while he drives. They worked under the hot sun, picking passengers and dropping them in the market. They worked under the rain as well, so as to meet up with the weekly accounting. Samson's son took turn in being their father's conductor. Day after day, they are on the road, but they never complained because they knew their hard work would bring food and happiness to their family. After weeks of toiling with his sons, Samson went to account for the week's job to Mr. Osondo. Mr. Osondo asked him to come tomorrow and see him. That same day, he returned home and gave some money to his wife and said, "Cook a delicious meal for the children and I tonight. They deserve it." That night, Samson's wife noticed he was not sleeping. She turned to him and asked, "Why are you so moody? Did something happen at work or perhaps at Mr. Osondo's house?" Samson sighed and said, "Mr. Osondo collected the weekly money and asked me to come back tomorrow and see him. I am worried because he has never done this before. What if he wants to collect the bus from me and he didn't want to tell me in the presence of our son? I can't afford to lose that bus, you know. That is the only bus that I have driven that is in good condition." His wife hugged him tightly and said, "Don't worry, my husband. You have worked really hard for him and everything will be fine. Let's enjoy our meal with the children tonight." Samson nodded and tried to put his worries aside. He knew he had worked hard and had never delayed with his weekly accounting. So he remained hopeful and continued to focus on his family, who were his greatest source of strength and happiness. The following day, Samson returned to Mr. Sondo's house. As he approached the house, Samson felt a mix of hope and worry. He can't afford to lose his boss. Mr. Sondo greeted Samson with a warm smile. "Ah, Samson, welcome back. Come sit down with me. Let's share some good food and drinks together," he said, gesturing towards a table filled with delicious food. Samson hesitated but sat down as the chief's mate served him. The hospitality felt unusual and Samson couldn't shake the feeling that something was up. However, he decided to listen and see what Chief Osondo had to say. After they had eaten, Chief Osondo leaned back in his chair and said, "Samson, you have worked really hard all your life. You deserve more than just a few coins for your labor. I'd rather teach you how to fish yourself than give you fish. I have an opportunity for you to become rich without all this hard work and toiling. You just have to see my old friend at the edge of the forest." Samson was taken aback. "Chief Osondo, what do you mean? How can I become rich without working hard?" The chief smiled and replied, "There is a way, Samson. There has always been a way. A way that requires a small ritual, but no bloodshed. Just little something here and there. You are getting older, and soon you won't be able to provide for your family through physical labor. Just think about it." Samson's heart raced. The idea of becoming rich without hard work was tempting, but he was also cautious. I don't know, Chief Osondo. This sounds risky. What kind of ritual is this? Chief Osondo reached into his robe and pulled out a large bundle of money. He handed it to Samson and said, "Here, take this. It is 10 times the amount you account to me weekly. Think of it as a gift, a small taste of what you could have. Just take your time to decide. There is no rush." Samson's eyes widened at the sight of so much money. He had never, ever held such amount of money in his entire life. He took the bundle with trembling hands and thanked the chief. "Thank you, chief. I will think about your offer and let you know my decision." As Samson walked home, his mind was filled with conflicting thoughts. The money in his hand felt heavy and the offer weighed even heavier on his heart. When he arrived home, his wife saw the bundle of money and her eyes widened in surprise. "Samson, where did you get all this money from?" she asked. Samson sighed and explained everything that had happened. "Chief Osondo gave me this money. I made an offer for easy riches. He said it involves a ritual but no bloodshed. I don't know what to do. It is so much money and it could change our lives." His wife listened carefully, her face full of concern. "Samson, this offer sounds too good to be true. We have always lived honestly and worked hard for what we have. Please be very careful, my husband. Easy riches can bring great trouble." Samson nodded, knowing she was right. "I will think about it carefully. We must not rush into anything that could harm our family." That night, Samson lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The money was hidden safely, but his thoughts were far from peaceful. He knew he had to make a decision soon, but he wanted to ensure it was the right one for his family. The promise of easy riches was tempting, but the unknown risk kept him cautious. Samson spent the night and few days wrestling with Chief Osondo's offer. The bundle of money was a constant reminder of the wealth that could be his. He thought about his family, his children's future, and the endless struggle they had faced. The temptation of an easy life was hard to resist, so one evening, as the sun set, Samson made up his mind. He decided to accept Chief's offer, hoping it would bring prosperity to his family. He told his wife, "I have made up my mind. I have made my decision. I will go to the forest edge tomorrow and meet the old man for the ritual." His wife looked at him with worried eyes but nodded. "Please be careful. Our family's happiness means more than wealth. Promise me you will come back safe." Samson hugged her tightly and promised, "I will come back safe, my wife. This is for our future, for our children." The next day, Samson made his way to the forest edge where the old man lived. The forest was dark and thick, with trees that seemed to whisper secrets. Samson's heart pounded as he approached the old man's hut. The old man, with a long white beard and wise eyes, greeted him. "Samson, Chief Osondo told me you would come. Are you ready for the ritual?" the old man asked. Samson nodded, his voice trembling slightly. "Yes, I am ready." The old man led Samson to a place in the forest. In the center of the clearing was a circle made of stones, and inside the circle were strange symbols drawn on the ground. The old man began to chant his voice low and filling the air with a strange feeling. Samson stood in the circle, feeling a mix of fear and anticipation. The old man approached him with a small bowl of dark oil and said, "This ritual will grant you wealth without shedding blood. Rub this oil on your body, and the gods will bless you." Samson took the oil and with trembling hands began to rub it on his skin. The old man continued to chant, and the air around them seemed to shimmer. As Samson applied the oil, he felt a strange warmth spreading through his body. The old man then placed his hand on Samson's head and said, "You have been chosen. The gods will grant you riches. But remember, there is always a price to pay. Be wise and use your wealth for good." With those words, the ritual was complete. The old man handed Samson a small pouch filled with gold coins. "This is just the beginning. More will come to you. Now go and take care of your family." Samson thanked the old man and left the forest, his heart filled with a mix of excitement and apprehension. When he returned home, his wife and children were waiting for him. He showed them the pouch of gold coins, and their eyes widened in amazement. "Samson, is this real?" his wife asked, holding one of the coins. "Yes, it is real, my wife. The gods have blessed us," Samson replied, hugging his family tightly. "Our lives will change for better now." That night, they celebrated with joy and hope. Samson felt a sense of relief, believing that the dark decision he had made would bring happiness and prosperity to his family. Little did he know, the true cause of his choice was yet to be revealed. In the days that followed, the ritual of Samson's life began to change dramatically. His humble home was soon filled with wealth beyond his wildest dream. Gold coins, fine clothes, and beautiful ornaments adorned their once simple home. Samson, who had always been seen as the poorest man in the village, was now one of the wealthiest. The villagers were astonished. Everywhere Samson went, people would stop and start whispering to one another about his sudden fortune. How did Samson become so rich overnight? They wondered. Some speculated that he had found a hidden treasure, while others believed he had been blessed by the gods. Samson's friends, who had once shunned him because of his poverty, now flocked to his side, eager to bask in the glow of his newfound wealth. They praised him, invited him to their homes, and treated him with the respect they had previously denied him. But Samson remembered how they had treated him. He was cautious in his interactions and dealing with them. At home, Samson's family was overjoyed with their new lifestyle. His children wore fine clothes and had plenty of food to eat. They could now afford things they had always dreamt of. Samson's wife, however, felt a mix of joy and concern. She loved seeing her family happy, but she couldn't shake the uneasiness about the mysterious source of their wealth. One evening, as they sat together in their newly furnished living room, Samson's wife turned to him and said, "My husband, I am happy that we have all these things now, but I am worried. How did this happen so quickly? Where did all this money come from?" Samson took her hand and looked into her eyes. "The gods have blessed us, my love. They have seen our struggles and decided to reward us. I made a promise to them and they have fulfilled it. You don't need to worry." His wife, still feeling a shadow of doubt. "I trust you, Samson, but please be careful. Sometimes great wealth can bring great trouble." Samson nodded, understanding her concerns and fear. "I promise I will always look out for our family. We have worked hard and now it's our time to enjoy the blessing." As days turned into weeks, Samson's wealth continued to grow. He invested in lands, bought many livestock, and even started his own transport company. The villagers' curiosity only grew, but Samson kept the secret of his wealth close to his heart, sharing it with no one despite the luxurious life they now live. His wife kept a close watch on her husband. She noticed how he seemed more distant and preoccupied at times, as if a burden weighed heavily on his shoulder. She knew Samson loved their family dearly, but she couldn't help to wonder if the price of their newfound wealth was higher than they realized. For now, the family enjoyed their prosperity, and the village buzzed with the stories of his transformation. Little did they know, the true test of Samson's choice and the price of his wealth was still to come. One day, a group of his old friends came to see him. They brought gifts and spoke with exaggerated joy about how happy they were to see him. and see him doing well. One of them said, "We are so proud of you. You have achieved so much in a short time. Please tell us your secrets. How did you become this rich?" Samson smiled politely, but felt uneasy. He knew that revealing the true source of his wealth would bring trouble. "I have been blessed by the gods," he replied. "They saw my hard work and decided to reward me." His friends exchanged glances, not entirely convinced. One of them leaned closer and said, "Come on, Samson. We are your friends. You can trust us. There must be more to it than just divine blessings." Samson maintained his claim. "It is the truth. The gods have been kind to me. I can't explain it any other way." His friends were persistent. They visited him regularly, each time trying different ways to coerce the secret out of him. They would flatter him, bring him lavish gifts, and even offer to share their own wealth for the knowledge. "I appreciate your offers, my friend, but I must decline. I can't share what is not mine just to give," Samson said. As time went on, his friends grew frustrated with Samson's reluctance and started to distance themselves once more. Some even whispered behind his back, spreading rumors and speculations about the true nature of his wealth. Samson felt the strain of their suspicion and the weight of the secret he carried despite the luxurious life he now lived. He often found himself longing for the simple and honest days before the riches came. He missed the genuine companionship he had. It was tainted by poverty, but yes, it was peaceful. At home, Samson's wife noticed his troubled. One evening, as they sat together, she gently asked Samson, "What is bothering you, my husband? I see the worry in your eyes." Samson sighed deeply and said, "Our friends, they keep asking about our wealth, the source of our fortune. They do not believe it is just the God's blessing. I can't tell them the truth, but their questions never stop." His wife squeezed his hand and said, "We must stay strong, Samson. We have each other, and that is what matters. Let them talk as long as we know the truth. We can face anything together." Samson nodded, grateful for her support. He knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, but he was determined to protect his family and the secret of their wealth. The return of his friends had reminded him that true royalty and love could not be bought, and he cherished the genuine bond he had with his family. Above all else, with his wife's reassurance, Samson resolved to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that their strength as a family would guide them through even the darkest times. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a messenger arrived at Samson's house with a message. The old man from the forest had summoned Samson. The message was brief and clear, causing a shiver to run down Samson's spine. He knew that the old man's summon could only mean one thing: a demand. The next morning, Samson made his way to the edge of the forest where the old man lived. His heart pounded with each step. When he reached the old man's hut, he found the old man waiting for him, his expression grave. "Samson," the old man said, his voice as ancient as the trees around them, "the time have come for you to fulfill your part of the bargain. The gods demand a sacrifice." Samson's heart sank. "What kind of sacrifice?" he asked, his voice trembling. The old man looked at Samson with piercing eyes. "You must sacrifice your only daughter, Oledo, to the gods. It is the price for the wealth you have received." Samson staggered back, his mind reeling with horror. No, you can't do this. You told me there won't be any bloodshed, no blood sacrifice whatsoever, no human sacrifice. Please, no, not my Oledo. She's my only daughter. I can't do this, please. I can't kill a human. My own daughter. The old man's face remained unchanged. "If you do not fulfill the God's demand, you will lose everything: the wealth, your sanity, and your life. The gods will take back their blessings and you will be left with nothing. Samson felt as though the ground had shifted beneath him. The thought of losing Oledo was unbearable. She was the light of his life, kind and gentle, loved by everyone in the village. He could not fathom the idea of sacrificing her. "Please, there must be another way," Samson pleaded, his voice breaking. "I can't harm my daughter." "Wise one, it's my daughter we are talking about here, my flesh and blood." The old man shook his head. "There is no other way, Samson. You have 7 days to make your decision. If you do not sacrifice Oledo within 7 days, the gods will take her themselves and you will suffer the consequences and run mad for some time and then die." Samson returned home, his mind full of fear and despair. He couldn't share this burden with his wife. How can he tell his wife that he's about to sacrifice their only child, only daughter? The thought of telling her was too much to bear. Samson couldn't sleep. The old man's demand haunted him. Sacrifice Oledo. How could he even think of it? Yet, the threat was clear. Refuse and he would go mad and his secret will be exposed. Oledo will still be killed by the gods. Accept and lose your only daughter and maintain your wealth. Samson paced the floor, his mind in chaos. "I can't do this to my daughter. I can't do this to my family," he whispered to himself, but the fear of losing everything, his wealth and his sanity, was heavy on him. The next morning, he went to Chief Osondo's house. "Chief, you told me the ritual won't involve blood sacrifice. You lied to me, Chief. You deceived me, and I will never, ever in my entire life forgive you for this." He stormed out of Chief's house and went home. During the day, Samson watched Oledo play, her laughter piercing his heart. "She is my only daughter," he thought. But then the old man's voice echoed in his head. "You have 7 days or the gods will take her themselves." Samson tried to rationalize. "I still have 2 sons," he thought. "They can carry on the family name." He knew it was a terrible thought, but the fear of losing everything pushed him closer to making the unthinkable decision. His wife noticed he's troubled. "What is wrong?" she asked, but he couldn't tell her. He just shook his head and said everything is fine. Days passed so fast, each day heavier than the last. On the 5th day, with his heart breaking, Samson finally decided to follow through with the ritual. The fear and the old man's threat left him feeling like he had no choice. He hoped somehow this terrible act would protect the rest of his family. But the decision tore at his soul, and he knew he would never be the same again. His family would never be the same again. On the 5th night, Samson's heart was heavy with dread. He prepared the drink and the black oil as instructed by the old man. His hand shook as he mixed the concoction, knowing the terrible purpose it served. Samson found Oledo playing in their yard. "Oledo, come here," he called softly. She ran to him with a smile, trusting her father completely. "Drink this, my dear, and use this oil. It's very important." Oledo hesitated, but took the drink. "Okay, father," she said, trusting his words. She drank the potion and took the oil. As the potion took effect and Oledo fell unconscious, Samson's heart broke. He carried her with tears to the forest, each step feeling like a weight on his soul. Samson reached the clearing where the ritual would take place. He laid Oledo gently on the ground, her face peaceful and unaware of the horror about to unfold. He took a deep breath, his hand shaking as he prepared to complete the ritual by pounding her in the mortar, as the old man had told him. "I'm so sorry, Oledo, my baby," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. He knelt beside her, the weight of his decision crushing him. Just as he was about to proceed, a piercing scream scattered the silence. "Samson, no!" It was his wife's voice. Her voice filled with desperation. She had followed him, suspecting something was terribly wrong. The villagers, awakened by her scream, rushed to the forest, their torchlights lighting up the darkness. They found Samson kneeling over Oledo and quickly restrained him. His wife ran to Oledo, tears streaming down her face as she cradled their daughter. "What have you done, Samson?" she cried, her voice trembling with shock and grief. The villagers took Oledo to the herbalist, hoping to undo whatever had been done to her. Samson was left behind, his heart shattered by the enormity of his action and the realization of what he had almost done. That night, Samson was tied up and kept in his compound. The villagers gathered him, their faces filled with a mixture of anger and pity. Samson's wife wept throughout the night, unable to comprehend how her own loving husband could be driven to such a terrible deed. As the first night passed and the light of dawn broke, the villagers gathered outside Samson's home, murmuring in disbelief and anger. Oledo has been taken to the herbalist, who was working tirelessly to reverse the effects of the ritual. Samson's wife sat beside her daughter, her tears falling silently, her heart breaking for what her husband had almost done. The villagers' anger grew as they learned more about Samson's action. They couldn't understand how a man they had known all their lives could be driven to such a horrific deed. Their trust in him was shattered. Replaced by a mix of outrage and sorrow, Samson must face justice, one of the elders declared. "We must take him to the king." Bound and surrounded by the villagers, Samson was led to the king's palace. His head hung low, the weight of his guilt pressing heavily on his shoulders. The villagers whispered among themselves, their eyes filled with a mix of anger and pity for the man they once respected. In the grand hall of the palace, the king sat on his throne, his face stern and filled with disappointment. The villagers presented Samson before him, explaining the terrible events of the night. "Samson, is this true?" the king asked, his voice echoing in the hall. Samson, weakened by the ritual's backlash, fell to his knees and confessed, "Yes, my king, it is true. I was manipulated and lured by Chief Osondo. He promised me wealth if I perform a ritual that have absolutely nothing to do with blood of any kind. But I didn't know it would come to this." The king's eyes narrowed. Samson, with a trembling voice, recounted the events leading up to the night of the sacrifice. He spoke of the old man in the forest, the ritual, and the immense pressure and fear that drove him to such desperation. "The wealth came at a terrible price," Samson said, his voice breaking. "Chief Osondo vanished after I accepted his offer. He knew what he was doing. He used me." The king listened, his expression growing darker with each word. He turned to his guards. "Find Chief Osondo now. He must answer for all his actions." But when the guards searched for Chief Osondo, they found that he had already fled the village, leaving behind only the chaos and destruction he has caused. "Samson, you have committed a grave sin," the king said. "But since you luckily did not take the life of your own daughter, thanks to your wife, I see the manipulation and fear that drove you. Your punishment will be severe, but your life will be spared. You will spend the rest of your days in prison, where your wife and children could come and see you often, but you will work to atone for your actions." Samson bowed his head, accepting his fate. "Thank you, my king," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. The villagers dispersed, their hearts heavy with the weight of what has transpired. Samson's wife returned to the herbalist. where Oledo was slowly recovering, she knew their family would never be the same again, but she held on to the hope that they could find a way to heal. Samson was led away to his prison cell. He felt a deep sense of regret. He had lost everything he had ever worked for, all for the promise of easy riches. The love and happiness of his family, which was once his greatest treasure, has been shattered by his own choices. In his cell, Samson vowed to spend the rest of his life atoning for his sins, hoping that one day his family might find it in their hearts to forgive him, his wife and daughter especially. As Samson lay in his cell, the sound of the village echoing faintly in the distance, he found a measure of solace. He had paid a high price for his wrong choices, but he hoped that his story would serve as a lesson to others. The love of family and the integrity of one's character were treasures far greater than any amount of gold. Samson's story spread throughout the village, a reminder of the dangers of greed and the true meaning of wealth. Though he spent his remaining days in captivity, Samson's heart found some peace in knowing that his family had forgiven him and moved on to live good and honest life.
Hey guys, thank you so much for sticking with us to the end of this amazing story. Thank you for watching to the end. And if you enjoyed it and you learned one or two things, please let us know in the comment section. Tell us where you're watching from and what you learned. We would really love to hear from you. And until we come your way next time, please don't forget to subscribe. Give this video a thumbs up and turn on your notification bell to get notified when we post another video. See ya. Bye.